Poor Man's Drag Truck Part 3. Well, as in the last episode, you saw me getting the front clip off and playing a joke on Jamie. But where I'm headed now is to inspect and get rid of the fuel lines and anything like fuel tank and all that stuff underneath. But first, I uncovered a bunch of different things. For one, you can see that brake line or brake hose is just about ready to go, so it's going to get new ones of those. The driver's side caliper seems to be sticking, so I will rebuild them, and you can rebuild them for the kit's like $7. So I'm going to stick with the factory braking system on this thing as much as I can. The shocks are being replaced with a set of 9010s, so I get, you know, good weight transfer to the back. So those, but I'm on the fence whether I'm gonna need to put the van lower control arm in here to drop it, but that might drop it too much. So I gotta wait until I mock it all up with the engine in it and everything else, and put the sheet metal back on and see where this thing really, what the riding height is. I don't mind the front end being slightly higher, but I don't want it going uphill. I don't want it going downhill either. So I just soon it sat level. Anyway, so I went over to this side too, and also just because all the grunge and goodies, I can see this brake hose is cooked. So, well, I'm just going to redo the whole brake system in the front and put new shoes in it. Or shoes, good lord, pads. I'm already way ahead of myself because I'm thinking about the back before I get done with the front. Anyway, so that's the direction I'm headed with all this stuff. I do have a bad on this side I have a bad stud too that needs some attention too, and if I save the rotors, if they measure out right and I can turn them, because I do have brake lathe here, if I can turn them, I'll save them too. Remember, poor man's drag truck. And if you stick with a lot of factory stuff, you can save yourself a lot of money. They will stop the vehicle because we're only building a 1050 quarter-mile truck, a 6-second eighth-mile truck, you know. So we're not over the top here, and something you can drive on the street too if you can afford the fuel. You see, I popped that brake line out. I want to show you these. These go up in a little hole in the frame, and they're just pressed in, and you can pop those loose, because I will be pulling out all the factory fuel lines and getting rid of the factory fuel tank. And today you can really see the grunge and crud build up in the frame, and it's going off to get one layer removed at least today. So that'll be a story for another day, because no point in video and a guy getting completely bloodbathed and slime. One thing I did want to go over is all the problematic areas that I found this morning that are going to need attention. We did put some pans in this thing, just a quickie job to keep it from being a Flintstone machine, but this is all going to get cut away and totally welded in. It'll be a video all in its own, and we will go through all that and how we're rebuilding it. You can see that that's bent, and the spot weld is broke loose. That'll get repaired, so we'll restructure all that. But also I will be making a patch for this hole in the end of the cab here to the rocker, and the rockers are good on the inside, but the outside you can see that needs a repair panel. So I'm going to do a partial repair on this rocker. I'm not decided on the other one yet. So all the carnage and goo and slime and ick, that all needs some attention. And as you can see, I knocked out a lot of rust and crap this morning from just this alone. And the camera's going dark. Come here, come on, wake up. There we go. And that side is going to need the same amount of repair. I have taken loose all of these clips for the fuel line here and got all that loose. There's one bolt that's got to come out here yet. And I'm not going to split them at this union because they're so nasty. I'm going like, well, that's just not going to end well. So I'm going to just take them off here where the hoses are, and then unbolt the hoses. And then we come to the fuel tank with all the fuel lines above going up there, which they're all just nasty too, and it's going to take a little bit to get them loose. One of the things that I was going to show you today, which is probably the handiest tool you'll ever have in your life, and with a million uses, oh, pardon me, is all these bolts are that. Come on, focus. There you go. So you can spray penetrating oil on that until you're blue in the face, and it's never going to do you any good. So what I do is I have this Dremel tool, and I put it on a very low speed because it lasts longer if you do that, and just go around them. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, and find the thread. Clean the threads out really good. Ever try to do this looking through a camera? That's ridiculous. Anyway, so there you have it. You've got really clean threads to start with and get all that gook out of the way. And then you can take and give her a shot of go-go juice and let her sit. And I one for lubing them up really good, let them sit for a while. That way everything comes apart pretty nice and easy, and you don't break a lot of stuff, and so you can repurpose it later if you want to. I will never put this fuel tank back in this truck. It is coming out. It is being deleted. So I don't really care what I break, to be honest, but I also don't want it to fight and snap this thing off on top, or break it loose and spin it, because then you're into a whole new process, and you're in here with a frickin' sawzall hacking away. And I'm not apt to use cutting torches when I'm trying to do these projects around fuel tanks. I don't know, you know, fuel, flame, things like that. It doesn't end well. I know a guy who torched out a fuel tank in a car once, and he is no longer with us. Let's see, what else I want to talk about. Well, okay, so we got all these straps that's got to get taken care of and get them down. And as you can see, there's a plate here that comes across here. And so what you do is you take the back two out, and it leans the fuel tank down. It pinches up against the body, and it kind of comes down here, and it comes out, and then you just slide it out to the back. And that's the way they had it all set up. But leaving this framework behind is not an option. So we will be taking and unbolting all of this as well, and doing away with all this. That other one at the top is fuel tank strap as well, and it is nasty, and I will go with my Dremel tool and clean all that up today. And any bolts that are sticking through here, I'm going to clean them up just like I showed you there, and I'm going to start getting started at this. I'm going to let it sit for a while. I may let it sit for half a day because I got ranch related stuff I have to go do, and so on there. Also, you know, the brand new, well, maybe I can repurpose those from an 8 1/4 into an 8 3/4 backing plate. So hopefully the emergency brake system I can save. I don't know that I'd ever use it, but you know, if you lost your brakes, which I had that happen to me on a race car once. I was street racing, I blew a brake line and lost my brakes because I was power braking it to heat my tires up, and at that point I had a brake leak, and then raced the guy and then hit the brakes, and it went to the floor, and I couldn't stop. So, here's another classic example of, you know, how grungy this stuff gets. You're never going to get that loose and off of there before it piles up so much rust under there. So you're better off just to get the rust off there first, and then lube it up really good, and it'll come apart relatively easy. They should make a really, really long deep well socket for this process. I thought about cutting 2 sockets in half and chopping them all up and make an extended one just specifically for doing these brake cables, because they suck. There's a really good picture of that bracket that goes all the way across. But that'll be all gone because the exhaust system has to go through here, and will be coming out probably out here, some kind of a baloney cut thing right about there. And so I'm not sure how that's going to fit going past all this brake apparatus either. It'll be a whole story for another day. Everything is cut, fit, cut. When you build something customized like this, I work in more of the custom world. The cross member, again, if I move the motor back, this is going to have to come back. So I will have to drill new holes in the frame up here and on the bottom of the frame rail to be able to move this back a couple of inches. And I am not going to make that choice until I get the engine sitting in it and figure out how much room I have to the firewall and whether or not it's really an advantage or not. A couple of inches does make a difference. I already got to make a custom drive shaft for it anyway, so with the 8 3/4 rear end in it and the way the pumpkin's going to sit and so on there, it's just going to be different. Now we got all the hoses going into the fuel tank. Those will all be disconnected up here. I don't know if you can see that very well or not. Actually, there's the lines right there. Anyway, I'm going to disconnect all the rubber components and just leave them with the tank, so when I drop it down, just all this stuff stays there. There's also the wiring harness that goes up here as well for the fuel sending unit, and I'm going to carefully take that off because I'm going to cut and tap into that and run that line back to the back of the truck where my fuel cell is, because I'm going to have a gauge in my fuel cell. So pretty much this is where I'm at. Is I've got to get the fuel tank dropped out of here next, get all the fuel lines pulled out, which I've got them all pop loose. You know, as I said, you know, this just, they pop loose in the frame, hit them in with a ball peen hammer, take a punch, put them on top, and they pop right out. Pretty simple. I may repurpose this other one of these lines, the big line. I may turn that into a return line because I will have a return line on my system just for safety purposes. A lot of guys don't do that. They just get the electric fuel pump and pumps it up to the carb and so on there. It doesn't recycle it back to the fuel tank. But if it does, then it allows the fuel to stay cool and cools the fuel down. So there's some huge advantages in your fuel being cooler for when you're, especially when you're racing. This trans mount is still in here. You can see that. So actually the bolts, this thing wasn't even bolted on. The guys never tightened the bolts down. One of them fell out and the other one backed out and was laying in here when I went to pull the motor out. And I was like, what the hell? Well, that explains my driveline vibration. So that's pretty much it for that. Going back up through here, this wiring harness isn't very good, but we're gonna, once it's cleaned up, then we can see what we're gonna do with it. You know, whatever needs to be repaired, we'll repair, and so on there. And that floor is terrible, but I do have panels for it. My son put these other panels in here, just a quick overlay, so he could drive it when he bought it from me. And then I ended up buying it back from him, so there might be a few zip screws to weld holes shut too. But I'm going to rebuild the whole floor. And I talked to Mopar Jeff, and I mentioned this before about putting a cage in this truck. If something goes horribly wrong and it goes upside down, I've already tipped over one truck in my life and luckily walked away from that one, which I shouldn't have, according to the deputy sheriff. But that's kind of how that is. But I wanted to show you all this stuff and show you the next portion of what part 3 is going to consist of. I was going to go into the rear end concept on part 3 and what's going to go on there and explain the B-body rear ends, versus truck and all that, and I will get to that. Possibly the next one, part 4, we'll talk about the rear ends. Actually, part 4 is going to be taking apart the donor rear end, which is laying back there. So that's all going to come apart very meticulously so it can be put in here. And then of course you got to pull the rear end out. And there's a million videos of guys doing this, so I just think it's redundant to do that. So I will cut to the chase. I will show you what I'm doing beforehand. I will go do the work. Then I will show you what I did after the fact and explain it as I've done. It's just so much faster. I like to keep these videos around 15 minutes and don't overdo it. Also, I'm going to also show you where the shocks are located. Now, there's a high probability that I'm going to move this shock and re-drill the hole and move that shock over so it's more straight up and down. But I got to figure out my shock travel length, and I can't do any of this stuff until I get the rear end put in here, and the shocks will be the least of my worries. If the back end's too low, I will probably go to a coilover after that. I've got a bunch of different ideas. Turn around this way. I've got a bunch of different ideas on what I'm going to do here, because as you can see, this is a 4-leaf spring, so that's not very strong. It is clamped, so that's good, and I could add an additional clamp in there, probably right there, but I just don't know that it's a huge advantage really to put another clamp in it. One is going to be sufficient, and I'm going to continue to use the 4-leaf spring. Now, I have done this once before, and we used B-body, or what the heck was it, 4-wheel drive springs, which I think is a 6-leaf, if I'm not mistaken. It's like 6 big fat leaves in there, and that of course lifts the back end up, and it's really rigid. So I guess I could go that route if I wanted to, but if you've ever taken all this old rusty crusty stuff apart, the time consumption and expense is ridiculous. So if this truck launched incredibly well with the small block in it, and so but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to get really stupid. I might even put wheelie bars on it just because I can. Not that it would need them, but it would look cool. Anyway, there is a Caltrack setup that you can get that welds on the rear end and actually would come over here, and I think it goes right in here, and it's a pivot point here for kind of a 4-link thing that Caltrack makes. But again, we're going for expense here, so if we can do stuff on the cheap, let's stay there. You can reuse the bottom shock mounts, and you know, the U-bolts obviously got to change because you have to have radius U-bolts going over the rear end versus the square tops, because you're going to put the rear end on top instead of on the bottom. And the geometry of all this is that pickup trucks are designed to lift and push the weight forward, utilizing the so it pushes the body and the box up to lift the weight and then pushes it forward. That's the whole concept behind this. And then the car, it's on top, so the torque lifts the front to shift the weight to the back. So that's why you want to move this and change this. If you leave this the way it is, all this can do when you drop the hammer on this thing is throw the box in the air and you're going to bust loose. If you've ever drove a pickup truck with any kind of horsepower at all, it just gets stupid in the back. It just breaks loose and goes all kinds of 7 ways and sideways, especially if you got a posi. And because it's throwing all your body weight into the air, it's not pulling it down to help you go forward, it's throwing it in the air. But again, these are designed to haul weight, you know, so there's a purpose behind all this. Also, there's a purpose in ground clearance as well, because it's a truck. So this is getting close to 20 minutes, so I'm going to kind of get going with all this. But again, this 8 1/4 is going to go bye-bye, and then 8 3/4 is going to be put in its place. And like I said, I'm not sure where I'm headed with the shock mounts yet, but all that will be determined at another time. These shocks, why they're put in an angle like that, is body sway. Like that, okay? So you got a big load in the back, and your body sways side to side. This slows the body sway. And for when you want to go straight forward, you kind of want them straight up and down as much as you can get them, so that, you know, you're not worried about body sway at that point. You're just worried about controlling the action of the body. In other words, slow it down. And so that's the whole purpose behind going that direction. I built a hell of a lot of cars, so and I've done a lot of stuff on the cheap. But anyway, I kind of want to cut this off. As you can see, I got a lot of work to do just to get the stupid fuel tank out of here and the fuel tank brackets, and that is going to... My God, this thing is like 6 blocks long. I bet I could drive halfway to California with that. With 6-cylinder, which is what this stupid thing had. I still can't get over it. But it's had an interesting life, and it's just about to get a whole lot more interesting. I hope you found this informative. I hope you like and subscribe, because as we go forward on this particular build, you're going to learn a lot about a lot of different things. There's a million ways to skin a cat, as they say, which I think is the most ridiculous thing in the world, but old sayings never die. That there's just a lot of different ways to do the same thing and get good results. And there's some things that you don't want to do because it's dangerous and sketchy, of course, but just when you're trying to build something, use a lot of common sense. That's all I got to tell you there. And ask people questions. I wouldn't have got anywhere in my career of building cars if I hadn't asked a lot of questions, and I've had a ton of mentors, which at some point I'm actually going to do a video about my mentors, because a couple of them are pretty famous people, and they were just absolutely amazing to me. I can't wait to get this rear end moved, but I really like these slots. I just really think they're cool. 1510, hell of an offset. I have 2 sets of these actually, and I'm really tempted to put slicks on one set, but I don't like the fact that the rear end is out this far, or I mean the wheels are out this far. When you're trying to race and do things like that, I would rather have the wheel centered more over the axle end, because it puts a ridiculous amount of stress on them lug nuts and the axle itself. And I've seen guys snap axles right at the and wheels to go flying, because they got big deep dish rims and they hook up super hard, and all of a sudden, bam, they break an axle and away they go. So, again, this is the 8 3/4 donor rear end, and we will be having a long conversation about that, because the rear end explanations that I'm going to do is going to be a little windy. It'll be for sure 20 minutes at least, because I'm going to talk a lot about the whole spring purchases and everything else, and I've got so much cleanup to do in here. It's unbelievable. Hey, the flying core support. I can't think of anything else right now that I want to really chat about. I've got a lot of work to do here to get caught up with this stuff for the next video. When this thing comes back in the shop, it's hopefully will be out of here today, and I have to do tractor things and maintenance stuff on one of my 706 farmalls, and my 504 is sitting over here, and it too needs love, lubrication, all that springtime stuff, so it can go do what it was born to do. I actually have a really cool video, by the way, of my son working with 38-inch tires on 15-inch rims, and if I could figure out a way to get it off my phone and put it out there, I would, because it is freaking hilarious. My machine broke loose from the concrete just trying to break the bead on those things, he does all the lifted truck stuff and I do all the rest. But this isn't, like I said, another project, but it's so bad. It's such a great tractor and I love it to death, but it is so bad as far as the paint has gone so bad that I just really think it's time to pull the sheet metal off and at least get the red and the white painted and pretty it up a little bit and just kind of work at it. That way I can like do the front axle the next time and the front part of the frame, and then kind of grab the fenders and kind of go that route. I'm not doing painting the engine and doing all that in the drivetrain and restoring it that way. I just want it to be a nice looking tractor that goes out here and does what it needs to do. This thing moves boats. Its sole purpose is mowing and boats, and boat season is right for us right now, is really on the cusp of things, because it's February I think 26th today, and it's 62 degrees out in Minnesota, which I could tell you what it was like 2 years ago when I had to cut giant holes in a snowdrift that was as high as my tire rack to get into my shop doors. So yeah, there was a storm and it was a mess. But I'm looking forward to boating season too, because as you can see, I have outboards like forever. And that's not even behind the shop. Anyway, I've been into vintage boats forever too, you know, pretty much my whole life. Alright, well, thanks again for watching. Hope I didn't bore you half to death, and you learned a little something and you can use on working on your stuff. Wow, sun glare into my truck. There we go. Maybe, nope. I give up. God, that sucked.